Din 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 dan ya din din din.
Hi, I'm Gindi Walkup. In this video, we're going to be looking at the 5 thrusts from Fiore with the longsword or sword in 2 hands. So, to start off with, it's useful to form the guard posta longa. And you'll notice that the point of my sword is at about my sort of throat or chin height, and my arms are well extended. This is probably the most important guard with just about any sword, but certainly with the longsword. And from this guard, you can make a direct thrust straight down the center line. So you can make a thrust anywhere from here up to here, right in the middle of the person, keeping your hands pretty much in the middle as well. You can also make that thrust from posta breve, this short position where the sword is very much withdrawn. I'm resting the pommel just below where my belt would be. My tip is maybe a little bit higher, or maybe the same height, doesn't really matter. As well as from porta di ferro mezzana, which is a very similar position, just my tip is pointing down instead of up. So I'll show you that from the front. So we've got posta longa, posta breve, porta di ferro mezzana. Longa, breve, porta di ferro mezzana. Now, it's fun when you're doing this stuff to practice with a pel. So I'll show you this with a pel. All right, I've got myself a pel. So what I'm going to do is from posta longa, I'm just going to poke the pel. And then the same thing from posta breve. And then from, and I'll get a little bit closer, porta di ferro mezzana, same idea. And you can see that the sword's absolutely just coming straight down that center. Usually I'll go for the upper chest or the head, but if my opponent's hands were quite low, I might go for the belly or something like that. So there are 4 other thrusts to have a look at now. So we'll look at the 2 other low thrusts now. So if, rather than starting on the center line, my sword starts on the left or the right, then it is a thrust from the low left or a thrust from the low right. And I'll start with this guard, denti di cingaro, boar's tooth or tooth of the boar. My tip's low on the left side. My pommel is on my left hip or just in front of my left hip. And I'm kind of really primed. And this is the sort of position I might come to after making a big cut. So I've started out here, I've made my big cut, and I finished here in denti di cingaro. Now from here, I'm going to rise and thrust. And you can sort of see that my hands are a little bit more on the left side. The thrust is still coming straight down the center line though. The point of my sword still goes directly to the center of mass. And then obviously there's also the same idea from the right side. So if I've got my sword here or here in coda longa, long tail, or here in tutta porta di ferro, complete iron gate, then in this case my hands are going to come up and my hands are a little bit more on my right side. Hands are low on the right side, tip is still on the center line, that's how I do my thrust. And I can practice that with a pel as well. Now, generally speaking, you can also do those 2 thrusts from posta longa as well, and that's actually where I often find myself doing them from. And the reason for that is because the defensive part of the sword is here, this part here, the strong of the sword. So where the strong is kind of where I have the most control over my opponent's sword. And so I want to put my strong where my opponent's sword is, and if their sword is low, I want to kind of cross their sword and then make my thrust. So from posta longa, I can extend low and thrust, or extend low and thrust. And you'll notice right now I'm kind of not worrying about the feet at all. We're going to add some feet in a moment, don't worry. Now we're looking at the 2 high thrusts. So we have a thrust. Again, it's nice to start in posta longa for this, but we can bring our hands high and thrust, again with the point on the center. And I'm just putting the strong of my sword up onto my high right side, so I'm crossed in the arms and then thrusting. And then I can do the same thing on the left. So I go to finestra and I thrust. So I'll show you that from the front so you can see. So I'm taking my strong and putting it where my threat might be, covering the threat and making my thrust. covering the thread on the other side and making my thrust. So those are the 5 thrusts, and now we're just going to add a little bit of footwork and practice that. And it's kind of handy to do this against a Pell or something, but I'm just going to move the Pell so it's a little more easy to see. Here's my Pell, and now I'm kind of visualizing some attacks happening at the same time as I send out my attacks, and I'm just going to be working on those 4 thrusts. So rather than the centerline one, the other 4. And it's nice to start in posta longa, but you obviously could start anywhere, and it's worthwhile practice if you know some of the other guards to try these from different guards. You should be able to make most of these thrusts from most of the guards. So from posta longa, if I want to reach with my thrust on a low left thrust, I can extend my front foot and thrust, a little bit like a lunge. Or I could take a passing step and thrust. If I wanted to do my low right, I'd usually take the passing step and turn the hands so that my strong is where the threat might be. And you'll notice I'm still really just hitting the Pell on the center line, wherever that may be. And then if I wanted to do the high right thrust, so with the crossed hands, I'll again usually take a passing step or take an advancing step. And the sort of usual rule of thumb is that if I start here and I want to keep my hands here, I want to keep my right side forwards. So I just take an advancing step. If I started here and I want to cover my right side, it's useful to put my left foot forwards. And so I'll put my left foot forwards and form posta longa with the left foot forwards. Or finestra with the left foot forwards. You can also, obviously, break the rules a little bit and do an advance or a passing step with the other kind of an attack. And that's also very helpful. And it forms some sort of the basis of some of the kind of named techniques from Fiore, like the exchange of thrust. So from posta longa, I'm doing a low left thrust and I'm taking a pass. And you'll notice I'm kind of turning my body a little bit as I do that. That's because I want to keep the hilt and my hands in front of my chest as I do this. Same idea, coming up into finestra, taking a passing step, turning my body. And it starts to look a little bit more like some of the later Spada da due mani actions from the Bolognese system. Now let's look at the cross thrust on the other side. So I could take an advancing step and go a little bit off the line there. So I'll show you that again. Advancing. And I could do the same thing over here. That's a little bit more unusual. There are some times where it might make sense, but normally the easiest thing to do if you want to do those actions is just pass. That's easy. So let's practice that. Let's kind of go through them. Starting with posta longa, we're going to do a direct line thrust with an advance. We're going to do that a few times, maybe 5, get a feel for it. And then we're going to do it with a pass. You'll notice I don't need to move my arms very much. That's because I'm already extended. If I was in posta breva, I'll take a bit more of extension of the arms. Or in porta di ferro mezzana. And again, notice that the tip comes up and then I step forwards. And that's very important. I want to lead with the threat with all of these kinds of actions. Now let's look at the 4 thrusts and add some footwork to those. So, low right with a passing step. And now low left, low right with an advancing step. Low left with a passing step. And really watch when I do that. I'm coming out to the side. That's what I need to do to keep the hilt and my hands in front of my chest. As well as now a low left with an advancing step. Now the two from Fenestra. And it's useful when you're practicing these to think about form the guard and make the attack. Form the guard and make the attack. So, Fenestra with an advance. And with a pass. Fenestra on the other side with an advance. Now, forming Fenestra correctly is quite a challenge, so you want to think about keeping your elbows pointing towards the ground. You want your arms to be comfortably crossed, and when you form the guard, it should be withdrawn. When you attack, that's when you extend it. So if you form the guard as part of an attack, then obviously you're fully extended the whole time. So, lifting it up, crossing the arms, elbows pointing down, advance, and pass. It's worth practicing all of those attacks from post to Didona, as well as from all of the other guards. Very briefly, I'll show you from post to Didona, and then have a go at some of the other guards you might know. So from post to Didona, I can bring the sword out and go directly into a high left side thrust. Boop. From the side. I can go from post to Didona into a high right side thrust. Out and flip. So you bring the sword in front just a little bit, make some space, flip it over. From the side over here, that's with a pass. And I could just as well do that with an advance. Post to Didona into a straight thrust. And that's really a lot more like making a cut. So I cut, or I kind of cut a little bit short and then finish by pushing the point forwards. And post to Didona, low left. And that's a nice time to use a crescere and passare. Or just a crescere. As well as pass. Pass. Which starts to get into your sort of countercut actions, a little bit like some of the other systems of longsword fencing. So we've just done low left, we've done high right, we've done high left, we've done straight down, and now we need to look at low right. Low right from post to Didona is a little bit trickier because you're kind of already there, but you can definitely do it. I would usually do this one with the advance. It's a little bit strange to do that with a passing step, but maybe sometimes it would make sense. Either way, you need to learn how to move your sword around and the sort of general theory of the thrusts. And those are the 5 thrusts. Enjoy!